Ladies and gentlemen, if you have graying hair, if your hair is getting grayer faster than you think it should, or if you're struggling with keeping your natural color, you're not going to want to miss tonight's episode of the Dr. Osborne Zone. We're going to be doing a scientific update on the known causes of graying of hair and the nutrients associated with that, and furthermore, what you can actually do to help reverse and prevent premature graying of your hair. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. You unlock this door with the key of compassion. Beyond it is another world, a world of science, a world of common sense, a world of sanity. You're moving into a land of both empathy and ethics, of nutritional knowledge and empowerment. You've just crossed over into Dr. Osborne's Zone. The question commonly comes in, can you reverse graying of the hair? And so that's the topic tonight that we're going to be covering. But before we get into the answer, let's talk first about why graying of the hair happens initially in the first place. So if we look at the most prevalent theory on why hair turns gray, it has to do with your body's ability to produce certain types of pigments. If we blow up on this image, you can kind of see a chemical breakdown of these two substances and how they're produced. These are the melanin-based pigments. So eumelanin and pheomelanin are the two pigment types that we produce in our cells, in our hair follicles, that give color to our hair. So eumelanin is more of the dark pigmentin, or brown and black coloration, and then pheomelanin is more of the, if you've got blonde hair or strawberry blonde or red hair, you're going to produce more of this type of pigment. But both of these pigments start from this very, very critical amino acid called tyrosine. So tyrosine is an amino acid that comes from the food that we eat in our diet. It's predominantly found in protein-rich foods. And we'll dive more into the chemistry of this because nutritionally this is super important. There are a lot of nutrients that aren't listed on this diagram that play a critical role in how tyrosine ends up as one of these two types of pigments. But this is how hair pigmentation occurs. Now that you have a general understanding of that, let's talk a little bit about what happens that causes discoloration or premature graying of the hair. So blowing it up on this image, this is the most prevalent and comprehensive theory on why we think hair turns gray. And it has to do with a few different things. One, it has to do with the stem cells, the melanocyte stem cells. These are specialized cells that actually help us to produce melanocytes, which are the cells that make the pigment. And so what scientists believe happens here is that we get forms of oxidative stress. You can see the three prevailing reasons why this happens. Number one down here, oxidative stress does damage to these little, you see these little black dots down here, these are melanocytes. So oxidative stress does damage to melanocytes. Now there's a lot of ways we can develop oxidative stress. Think of oxidative stress as you being exposed to environmental chemicals, pollutants or chemicals in your food are potential possibilities. Overexposure to UV, and I don't mean getting normal regular sunshine. I mean going out and getting sunburned. So the severe oxidative damage that can happen from skin burning, not from sunshine exposure. So it's the oxidative stress that damages the melanocytes. Then we can have genotoxic stress that damages melanocyte stem cells, which is right here in the hair follicle. You can see this, I've highlighted these little yellow structures. Those are stem cells that go on to make melanocytes, and so genotoxic stress can damage those. And there are a number of different things that can cause genotoxic stress as well. The same types of things, the chemicals in our environment, the chemicals we're being exposed to in our foods, etc. And then we have oxidative or genotoxic stress that can actually affect the hair itself. So you can see in this shaft, this is the hair follicle. And this dark structure coming out of the follicle, that's the shaft of the hair. And so you can have damage to the hair itself, damage to the stem cells that produce melanocytes, or you can have damage to the actual melanocytes themselves. all of these damages are oxidative in nature. And so let's have a deeper conversation about what that really means and what that looks like. Because if you understand this, you're going to understand how to protect your hair from prematurely graying. And a lot of the strategies that we're going to talk about are going to make so much better sense. So what we're looking at here is the antioxidant systems within the human body that help to prevent that oxidation that we were just talking about. And as it relates to hair, we've got oxidative stress creates what are known as superoxide anions. These are, okay, so let's just stop talking about the chemistry part. Just think of this as a free radical. If we want to really simplify it, you've all probably heard the term free radical. And free radicals are these little charged particles that can go around in our body and do damage. This is why we talk, you constantly hear about in the anti-aging media, you hear about free radicals and antioxidants, right? The two diametric opposing forces that combat each other. So too many free radicals can cause oxidative damage. And not enough antioxidants will prevent your body from getting rid of free radicals. So the name of the game is it's normal to produce free radicals. That's a normal part of human physiology. But it's also normal that we have good antioxidants, so these two balance each other out. But when you have too many free radicals, this is where the oxidative damage comes in. So too many free radicals equals oxidative damage. So if you just kind of understand that at its simplest level, then you'll understand what we're about to say. So you'll notice there are these pathways here, very chemically oriented, but SOD is one of them. SOD is an antioxidant enzyme. It's sometimes referred to as superoxide dismutase, but it's an antioxidant enzyme system. And what's important to understand here is that in order for this system to work, in other words, this system helps to get rid of free radicals. In order for this system to work, that requires copper, and it requires zinc, and it requires another mineral called manganese. So these three minerals serve as almost like the keys that start the motor of this enzyme and allow it to get rid of free radicals. So SOD is a very important component. So this is one of the most important components as it relates to getting rid of free radicals. Then we also have, if you look over here, we have this GSHPX system. This is glutathione. Many of you have heard of glutathione, the master antioxidant of the body. It's what the liver uses to take out the trash. But glutathione also, the glutathione system, this is glutathione peroxidase, helps us to, again, break down free radicals to prevent them from damaging our tissue. So think of SOD as number one, think of glutathione here as number two, and then think of this third one here as number three. This is catalase. And catalase is an enzyme system that will further break down antioxidants into water and oxygen. And so these three systems work together to quench free radicals from creating what I showed you here in the hair follicle itself, from creating an excessive amount of oxidative damage, okay, to the structures that help you pigment your hair follicles. And so if you have excessive antioxidant or excessive free radicals and not adequate antioxidant function, you're going to be more susceptible to graying of your hair, no matter what your age. And this is going to make better sense. We'll talk in more depth here in just a minute about some of these other things. But I want to show you just some of what the researchers are saying about this. So, and you can see here, one of the most visible signs of hair aging is graying of the hair, also known as Kennedy's. This hair disorder is mainly caused by oxidative stress. Again, free radical production, accumulation of reactive oxygen species, in essence, accumulation of free radicals, and a decrease in the presence of melanocytes and melanoblasts, resulting in a decrease in hair pigmentation. This was a study done in 44 male volunteers with gray hair. After 4 months, we evidenced a reduction in the proportion of gray hair and in the number of gray hairs relative to day 0. In conclusion, we clearly evidence that oxidative stress is a key factor in triggering cascade of events leading to loss of hair pigmentation. So again, what's causing the premature graying? It's oxidative stress, free radicals. Let's look at some more research on this. You can see here a systemic redox imbalance. So let's make sense of these terms. Redox stands for reduction oxidation. This is just the system in your body that helps you get rid of free radicals. And so when you have an imbalance in the redox system, that means you can't get rid of free radicals effectively. So when we say a systemic redox imbalance, it means you're not capable of breaking down free radicals as effectively as you otherwise should be. So this study, a systemic redox imbalance was present, meaning these people could not get rid of their free radicals, in premature candidates. This is premature graying of the hair. Patients in our study cohort, due to raised pro-oxidant levels, in other words, they had too many oxidative chemicals, and reduced antioxidant prowess as evidenced by significantly higher serum MDA. This MDA, this is a blood test that your doctor can measure on you. If you're wondering, this is one of those tests you can request, and it's a marker in the blood of a inability to break down free radicals. In essence, it's a risk factor as well, not just for graying of the hair, but it's a risk factor for other chronic diseases, because too much MDA is a sign of damage and that your body's not able to process that damage. So if you come down here, our study makes a strong case for therapeutic supplementation with antioxidants in patients with premature candidates. And you can see here, this is glutathione, this is SOD. What were we just talking about a moment ago? We were talking about these patients in this study had low glutathione and low SOD, therefore they couldn't break this chemical down that's a free radical, and that free radical causes damage. So going back to this diagram, you can see here, that's the SOD, that's the glutathione peroxidase. So notice there's a lot of technical chemistry involved here, but if we're, again, just simplifying it, if you can't get rid of the free radicals that your body is naturally going to produce by being exposed to the environment, then your hair follicles will take on damage and your hair pigmentation will go away sooner rather than later. So next, I want to show you, kind of give you a breakdown on something we're going to be talking quite a lot about tonight. And that is, as I mentioned earlier, I mentioned tyrosine, and it said that tyrosine was an important factor in your body's ability to produce the pigments, eumelanin and pheomelanin. Remember, tyrosine produces these two chemicals that allow your hair to get pigmentation. And so if we look at the biochemistry of tyrosine, as you see in this diagram, tyrosine is an amino acid. Again, it comes from protein. So if you eat adequate protein, and we'll talk more about this shortly, if you eat adequate protein, you're most likely going to get adequate tyrosine. Phenylalanine is also an amino acid. Phenylalanine is an essential amino acid that if you also get from protein, but if you eat enough of this one or this one, then you're going to have the ability to get to dopamine, dopa specifically, which if we go back here, you see here, tyrosine has to produce dopa so that these other reactions can occur. You see all these other different chemicals that have to be produced to get to eumelanin. This all stems from tyrosine and dopa. So important that you understand the nutrition relationships here. So for us to get phenylalanine and turn it into tyrosine, one, we have to make sure we eat enough protein. But what I want to show you here is that in order to convert that phenylalanine into tyrosine, that requires vitamin B3, which is NAD, also known as vitamin B3. It requires iron. It requires folate, which is vitamin B9, and BH4, which is a branch off of folate or subtype of folate. To get from tyrosine to L-dopa also requires vitamin B3, iron, folate, BH4, so same things, plus vitamin D, as well as omega-3. So these nutrients are all super important for your body to be able to convert the amino acids into dopa, which then goes on to produce the pigments of our hair. So keep this diagram in mind. We're going to come back to it a few times today, but it's going to make everything else make better sense. Okay, next let's talk a little bit about some of the lifestyle triggers that can cause or increase the risk of developing gray hair. Now, we've got high carbohydrate diets, smoking, alcohol, and high stress. These are all things that have been scientifically shown to be more or less driving forces behind premature graying of the hair. We could add something else to this list though. We could add certain medications, not all, but there are certain medications that can drive this as well. So let's talk about what some of those things are, so that, you know, again, if you're doing these things, you make the appropriate decisions in your diet, lifestyle, behavior. So you can see here in this study out of the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology, we've got the results of this study: family history of premature hair graying, obesity, and greater than 5-pack years history of smoking were significantly associated with premature hair graying. In essence, smoking, being overweight, and having a family history of premature graying of the hair were all associated with people to be more likely to develop it. Smoking is a control factor within your control. Being obese is also a factor within your control. One of the biggest factors in obesity today is this: high carbohydrate diets drive insulin resistance. Insulin resistance drives metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome, side effects, obesity. So we know high carbohydrate diets can be a problem. And when I say high carbohydrate diets, your aim for carbohydrates in your diet should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40% of your total calories should be carbohydrate, or less than that, but not more than that. If we look at some of these other studies here, we'll blow these up. You can see the abstract of this particular systematic review and meta-analysis of research. We'll go here. Although many risk factors are reported in literature, smoking, again, smoking showing up, vitamin B12, folate, vitamin B7, and mineral deficiency are found to be associated with premature graying of the hair. Other important risk factors are family history, as I mentioned a moment ago, obesity, so we see obesity showing up again, high blood pressure, lack of exercise, certain medications, and there are certain genetic syndromes as well, dyslipidemia, thyroid disorders, hyperuricemia, and alteration in liver function. So those of you with fatty liver disease, or been told you have fatty liver disease or thyroid disease, and you don't exercise, you're overweight, maybe you've got high blood pressure, you're on some medications, those are all things that are going to drive this process, right? So if you really, really want to move away from it, you've got to consider the lifestyle changes, because all of these diseases are minus the genetic syndrome issue, the rest of this stuff is choice. I know many of you may not understand that thyroid disease is choice. It's inadvertent choice, because if you don't know what drives it nutritionally, you don't know what to change nutritionally or through your diet or lifestyle to overcome it. And if you're confused there, go back and watch some of my thyroid crash courses where we talk about the fact that thyroid disease can actually be nutritionally taken care of. Okay, another review here. Significant correlation between smoking and premature hair graying. The possible explanation to this is the pro-oxidant, remember we've been talking about free radicals, the pro-oxidant effect of smoking on the body, leading to increased reactive oxygen species or free radical damage to hair follicle melanocytes. It's what I showed you a moment ago in those diagrams. Okay, moving on to this next one. You can see here smoking, or smoker's hair. Does smoking cause premature hair graying? You see smokers had earlier onset of hair graying in this particular study. 31 versus 34 of the non-smokers using, okay, so this basically, if you're a smoker, you were 2.5 times more prone to develop premature hair graying. You guys see the trend? Smoking causes oxidation, damages you, subsequently increases the risk for you to damage your own hair follicles. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about some of the research. I've talked a little bit about some association with obesity and premature graying of the hair, as well as hypertension. And this is a study that kind of confirms a little bit more on top of that. If you look here, patients with highest hair whitening were older and had a higher percentage of hypertension. Moreover, this subgroup had increased ascending aortic diameter, so they were starting to develop a weakening of the aorta, which is caused by free radical damage. Same thing that causes damage to melanocytes, which pigment your hair. They also had higher serum uric acid, and they also, when they looked at height, weight, waist circumference, and C-reactive protein, had some issues there as well. So these are all, think of this as all risk factors for cardiovascular disease, risk factors for stroke and heart attack, etc. So kind of the conclusion down here is we think that oxidative stress may be one of the stressors involved with premature graying of the hair because it coincides with all of these other risk factors of chronic inflammatory disease. And then if we look at this study, which correlated the association between premature graying of the hair and metabolic syndrome, it's just more evidence on top of that. So you can see evidence that metabolic syndrome is independently associated with premature hair graying after controlling the confounding factors. In the past, several studies have reported the possibility of gray hair being a risk factor for coronary artery disease. Therefore, metabolic syndrome may be associated with hair graying because coronary artery disease is a major clinical outcome of metabolic syndrome. Analyzing the cohort from the Copenhagen City Heart Study, the relative risk of heart attack was 1.9 for men with completely gray hair compared to men with no gray hair. In addition, a recent study measured carotid artery intima thickness. So another, I just talked about the aorta. Another study they're mentioning here is on the carotid artery, a surrogate marker for coronary artery disease in young and middle-aged men, and found it to be related to gray hair. So if you had premature carotid intimal thickening, it was linked to premature gray hair. There were also an observational study reporting that the incidence of coronary artery disease was higher in men with more severe gray hair. So it's not that heart disease is causing the gray hair, and it's not that the gray hair is causing the heart disease. It's that this same underlying mechanism that causes heart disease is the same underlying mechanism that exacerbates damage to hair follicles, leading to premature graying of the hair. So the takeaway here that I want you to gather is that the better health you have, the more you control free radicals from being pervasive in your life, the better off you're going to be. Okay, let's look at some of these others. You see risk factors for premature graying. This is 1,100 participants in this study. 315 or 28% of them had premature hair graying. Maternal and paternal premature hair graying, alcohol consumption, presence of chronic disease, educational status. And what is this linked to? Educational status is linked to diet choice. And it's also linked to being able to afford real food. So that's socioeconomic status, educational status, because people that don't have the education or don't have the resources, financial resources, can't afford to buy the things that are healthy, so they're eating processed junk food. Again, these are risk factors for chronic disease. Hair loss, perceived stress scale score, age, and height were significantly higher in subjects with premature hair graying. So again, alcohol consumption, chronic disease, poor education, hair loss, and their perception of their stress. They did what's called a PSS, a perceived stress score, on these individuals. Of course, age has something to do with it because what do free radicals do? It's not just free radicals. We all make free radicals. We all have systems that get rid of free radicals, but free radicals times time equals damage. If you have behaviors, so time is going to catch us all. We all will age, right? But time is a function of age. Free radicals are not. So if you don't take care of yourself, if you smoke and if you eat like garbage, then you're going to have an increase in free radicals. Now multiply that by time and you're going to have an increase in your damage, right? And that increase in your damage is going to increase oxidative stress on the melanocytes that give your hair its color. I hope you guys are seeing the theme as it's evolving. Free radical oxidative stress is the theme. If we look at this next one, I want to talk a little bit about some of the medications, the drugs and meds, as I mentioned. There are certain types of medications we know can increase free radical damage, but also some of them have impacts on the biochemistry of hair pigmentation. And so I've highlighted some of these medications that if you're on any of these and your hair is turning gray prematurely, you kind of understand a little bit better. So one is chemotherapeutic drugs. These TKIs, tyrosine kinase inhibitors, they stop the metabolism, proper metabolism of tyrosine into hair pigment. We also know that anti-epileptics or seizure medications like phenytoin and phenobarbital can create premature graying of the hair. We know that anti-androgen drugs, particularly ladies, those of you who had breast cancer and your doctor wants you to take tamoxifen for 5 years, it's going to prematurely gray your hair. I'm not telling you not to take your tamoxifen. I'm just telling you that this drug can cause premature graying. And then those of you taking antimalarials. Now, up until this last several years, these drugs like chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine were often thought as predominantly antimalarials until COVID came along, and then many doctors were prescribing hydroxychloroquine for COVID, and many people were staying on it or taking it as a prophylactic, but you should be aware that this medication can trigger premature graying of your hair as well through the chemistry. And so you can see here it decreases pheomelanin production for many. So again, that's one of the pigments for blonde red hair. So medications can definitely affect the color of your hair in that way. So now let's talk about nutrient deficiencies that are linked to premature graying. I showed you earlier a diagram of tyrosine and all the nutrients that were required to help you metabolize it into dopa, which is important for producing hair pigment. And so this is a short list. So I just put this here together for you if you want to take a screenshot of this. As you can see here, vitamin B5, vitamin B, this is sometimes referred to B7, sometimes referred to B8 as well, but biotin, sometimes referred to as the skin, hair, and nail vitamin, vitamin B12 deficiency, vitamin D. And so again, these are deficiencies. Magnesium and calcium, iron, zinc, copper. I showed you earlier, I said there was an enzyme called SOD, superoxide dismutase, and I told you that zinc and copper play a role in how that enzyme can get rid of free radicals. And these are some of the reasons why these are so important. Copper also plays a role in the production of melanin, which is the pigment that we're referring to. And then antioxidants as a whole, right? We said the three primary antioxidant systems, this was number one, and then we said GSH glutathione as an antioxidant system was number two, and then not SOD, but catalase was number three as antioxidants. So these three systems here are antioxidant systems that your body relies on to protect your hair follicles. Glutathione is a specific nutrient. It's a tripeptide. It is an antioxidant. Okay, so some redundancy here. And then protein, I showed you earlier, the tyrosine, as I mentioned, phenylalanine and tyrosine being the amino acid, the primary amino acid that drives the production of hair pigment material. So protein's got to be part of the equation here. So saying all that, let's talk about some of the research on these things. So these are all human studies that we're going to talk about, and it's important. Now, if you've watched my show for any length of time, I always try to bring the human studies because there are also animal studies with a lot of this stuff, but it's important that we try, if we have human studies, that you're aware that those exist. So in this case, these are human studies on laboratory. You can see on premature hair graying in secondary and pre-university school children. So these are younger kids, right? And so among the regional lab parameters, serum, this S stands for serum. So this is serum calcium and serum ferritin, which is a surrogate marker for iron, as well as vitamin D3 were low in patients with premature graying of the hair. There was significant high number of vitamin D3 deficient and insufficient among the cases. So vitamin D being one of the predominant. Now, I think it's important to mention something about vitamin D. There's some research that's just coming out that vitamin D deficiency, so low vitamin D can cause dysbiosis. Affects the, what does that mean? It affects the flora, the healthy bacteria in your GI tract. And that many of these flora are very critical for generating the production of B vitamins. Now, the one that's most linked to premature graying of the hair is vitamin B5, otherwise known as pantothenate. So the reason I bring that up is because they found in this study, what they measured was calcium and ferritin and vitamin D3. The vitamin D3 was low and in predominantly more low in people with premature gray hair. And this is one of the mechanisms, is that vitamin D regulates the flora, it regulates the microbiome, which is responsible in large part for producing B vitamins. So one of the reasons why we see people so deficient in B vitamins so frequently nowadays is because of the widespread use of antibiotics and the widespread use of chemicals that behave like antibiotics. So you think about pesticides and herbicides that are put into our food, chlorine and fluoride that's put into our drinking water. You've got all those that are just there present in the food and in our water, but then you also have the purposeful use of antibiotics, and so which are used, in my opinion, they're way out of control. Doctors generally, they use the philosophy of take the antibiotic just in case, right? Not knowing that they're going to create a major problem here in your flora, and that is going to affect your ability to produce B vitamins, and that's going to affect potentially your hair, among other things. Okay, so some of this other research here, let's blow this one up. So serum iron, zinc, and copper concentration in premature graying of hair. This study was conducted on patients under 20. So these are under 20 years of age, right? This is not formally the definition of what premature hair graying is it gray hair that's happening before the age of 20. So we studied serum iron, copper, and zinc concentrations of 66 patients and 66 controls. Serum copper was significantly lower in patients compared with controls. A low serum copper concentration may play a role in premature graying of hair in our society. What we know about copper is copper plays a major role in the production of melanin pigments. So if we go back to this diagram right here, told you I'd come back to this, but tyrosine has to get to DOPA, and then from DOPA, there's several biochemical steps to get to eumelanin and pheomelanin. So just kind of reinforcing these things for you guys so that you can see it. But we get here, we're talking about copper. You can see phenylalanine to tyrosine to DOPA, and you can see iron plays a role, and all these other nutrients play a role. But one of the things that we said was linked to premature graying of the hair was stress. And so when stress is high, what happens is instead of using that DOPA to make hair pigment, we use that DOPA to go to stress hormones. Because what are these guys? These guys here, these are our stress hormones. The predominant stress hormones produced when we have excessive stress. And so what happens is we basically cannibalize the L-DOPA to get to epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. And so we steal the raw ingredients that would otherwise go to make hair pigment to make the hormones that help us cope and adapt to stress. So there's a shunting that occurs that leaves us depleted for the ability to make these chemicals eumelanin and pheomelanin. And this process also here requires copper. So you're burning through, when you're under a lot of stress, that increased stress, it's going to burn through all these nutrients a lot more aggressively or more readily because your body's trying to make stress hormone to help you cope and adapt to stress. And so you see copper here, you see vitamin C here. We know that vitamin C is dramatically reduced as a result of increases in stress, and that magnesium is reduced with increases in stress. SAMe, which is a type of an amino acid byproduct, it's S-adenosylmethionine specifically, and then folate, which is a B vitamin. So these things all being burned through as a result of intense stress, but copper being one of those key nutrients for that process. And you can see in this study what we were just saying is that copper was reduced in those individuals. Okay, so let's look at some of these other studies. 60 patients with premature hair graying and 30 age and sex-matched healthy individuals served as control. What they found, serum iron, copper, and calcium levels were reduced in association with premature hair graying and correlated with its severity. Premature graying may be an indicator that hair is not getting enough nutrients and minerals, and supplementation with these trace elements might reverse and is expected to prevent progression of premature hair graying. However, further studies are needed to find the underlying mechanism of this relationship. So we've got a lot of studies, folks, that show premature hair graying and nutritional deficiency, but we don't, unfortunately, there's not enough studies showing doctors using these nutrients to see about reversing graying of the hair, although I will show you some. In this one here, factors associated with premature hair graying, serum ferritin, that's iron, were lower in patients with premature gray hair than control group. Significant proportions of patients with premature hair graying had a sedentary lifestyle, so going back to what we were talking about a minute ago with obesity and exercise, and admitted to having irregular eating habits. So poor eating habits, poor exercise habits, low levels of iron. Nutrition, nutrition, nutrition. Such an underrated topic in all aspects of health. Here's another one. Investigation of the metal concentrations of potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, copper, zinc, manganese, and iron in the black and gray hairs of the same person in Taiwan was performed. What they found, direct evidence to suggest that reduction of hair trace element and mineral element concentrations may be one of the factors associated with hair graying or aging. Manganese, copper, magnesium, calcium, and sodium obviously have greater effects on the hair color and aging. So nutrition as it relates to gray hair. Who would have ever thought nutrition would play a role? Hope you can detect my sarcasm. Here's another one. Prospective analytical trial. In this one, 52 patients with premature gray hair, micronutrient levels that they measured, serum B12, biotin, and folic acid. And down here you can see the study unveils the association with vitamin B12, folic acid, and biotin deficiencies being more common in those with premature gray hair. And then we have here, on the basis of our study, we conclude that patients of premature graying can have micronutrient deficiencies such as copper, zinc, iron, magnesium, vitamin B12. These micronutrients should be analyzed in patients of premature gray hair. If facilities are available and if patients are found deficient, they should be supplemented for the same. So, a lot of data on this. I'm going to show you a study done where they actually found repigmentation. Successful treatment of gray hairs with high doses of pantothenate, which is otherwise known as vitamin B5. And this, again, a small study, human study, but a small one. And so what they took two adolescent girls having premature graying of hair. They were treated with 200 milligrams of B5, which is calcium pantothenate, orally in a follow-up of 29 and 13 months, respectively. And what they found was graying of hairs is reversible, at least in some cases. These cases, they found tremendous repigmentation of hair. But at the end of a study of only 2 people, what do they always say? They say further studies are therefore very much indicated. And I don't disagree, we need more studies. But here's the thing, you can't patent vitamin B5 or calcium or magnesium or iron. They're not patentable. So there's no, when we talk about money, what gets the scientific research funding? Drugs with patents. This is part of the corruption in our society, is that there's too much influence by the pharmaceutical companies. These drugs with patents get the research dollars, and vitamin B5 doesn't. And so when you're talking about putting a study on, a big study, if you do a study of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 patients, you're talking in excess of $2, $3, $4 million just to put the study on, to get all the resources that are necessary to complete a research study of that nature. So the dollars just aren't there to do nutrient studies, and so they're very rare. Usually what we find in the medical literature are case studies like these, where you have, a doctor reporting on 2 individuals after using high doses of vitamin B5, seeing some repigmentation of hair. Now, what would happen if we spent $10 million of federal money on actually investigating some of these things? I'm of the opinion that we would see a tremendous improvement in our knowledge base of which nutrients actually do support hair recoloration. And I've seen it in clinical practice. I've seen people come to me that had what are called flag signs. Since we talk about that, flag sign looks like this. So you can see it's a band of white hair in the pigmented hair. And this is an example of a flag sign in a severely malnourished child. But it also happens in adults. I've seen flag signs multiple times in adults where we were able to reverse the graying. And where I see it the most is in people that have been on plant-based vegan type diets. Not necessarily vegetarian diets, but specifically vegan diets. And that being said, let's put up here, because you can see in this study, they're finding the relationship between diet. In this case is 1,100, almost 1,200 volunteers between 18 and 20. And what they found was that a vegetarian diet preference increased the risk of graying of the hair. And why does that happen? It happens because when you eat plant-based, especially more toward a vegan diet, you're getting less protein. There's no doubt about it. And there's a condition called kwashiorkor, which is what this picture is showing. Kwashiorkor is protein malnutrition, right? So this is protein malnutrition of the severest type. So if you see like a flag or a band of gray hair on somebody that you love, if there's a family member that you have and you see that kind of finding, this is most likely due to either a lack of protein, or the other thing that comes with protein is vitamin B12. And as I've shown you multiple times tonight, there are research studies showing that vitamin B12 deficiency is more associated with premature graying of the hair. So when you eat protein, aside from the protein itself, what do you get? You get tyrosine, which we've talked about as being a building block for hair pigment. You get phenylalanine, and going back to that little diagram there, you get phenylalanine. But when you eat protein, you get B12, you get more B6, you get more methionine, which is what SAMe is. I showed you that earlier. And you get more iron. And when you eat animal meats, you get more folate, as specifically liver, if you're eating organ meats. Now, you can get folate from green leafy vegetables, but you get a lot more of it if you're eating organ meats. And then in addition to that, you get more copper, and when I say more, you get more bioavailable. So these things, copper, folate, iron, B6, B12, these are all, well, B12, you don't get it at all on a plant-based diet, but you get it on a vegetarian diet if you're using like eggs or dairy. But you get so much more from animal protein meats. But some of these others, you get more bioavailable forms of the nutrient if you're eating meat-based foods. And so a lot of the rhetoric right now is really anti-meat, pro-plant. There's some very nefarious forces at work in our world that want you to eat bugs, and that want you to eat, soy, genetically modified soy protein, and they want you to eat a bunch of unhealthy corn derivative stuff that is easy to grow and is subsidized and is sprayed with pesticide. And those things are just, one, they're just not good for you. Two, they're inadequate protein sources. And three, there is no substitute in terms of protein that's better than animal-based sources. It is by far the best way to get protein. So if a lot of people are under-eating protein because the generic dietary recommendation, and this is true in the US and I think in the European Union, but 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per day, I should say grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day is the recommendation. This is nothing. I mean, this is probably half of what most humans need, especially growing kids. Growing kids need 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram. Adults, generally, in my experience, need 1.5 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day as kind of a baseline to get adequate quantities. And so many of you are under eating protein because you have a fear of meat, because there's a phobia of cholesterol, right? The whole system is based on cholesterol fear porn. Cholesterol, we're told, is bad. Meat has cholesterol. Therefore, meat also is bad. And it's nonsense. We need cholesterol. You can't make stress hormones without cholesterol. You can't make sex steroids without cholesterol. You can't form brain synapses without cholesterol, and you need it. And they keep lowering, they keep moving the goalposts of what normal cholesterol should be. It used to be 280 was normal. Now they want you down at 200, and there's no real scientific justification for that tremendous reduction. But they're selling a hell of a lot of drugs to get people's cholesterol down, and they're getting a lot of people off of adequate animal proteins. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people are getting gray hair sooner. That's one aspect of what we're seeing, and that's the topic of today's show. We're seeing a lot more than that in terms of poor effects. But again, kwashiorkor protein malnourishment, you don't have to have kwashiorkor. Kwashiorkor is a pretty severe condition. It's where you see ascites and wasting, muscle wasting, and it can kill you. It actually, this is a severe form of malnutrition, and it can absolutely kill you. Actually, before I put that study away, I highlighted one other thing I wanted to point out here. You can see here, this is from the Handbook of Clinical Neurology. So, kwashiorkor is a form of malnutrition resulting from excessive dietary intake of carbohydrates. So, we've been talking about excessive carbohydrates. They call them sugar babies in third world countries. Flour dystrophy. For those of you who haven't yet, check out my book, No Grain, No Pain. Flour, wheat, barley, rye, the excessive carbohydrate grains in the diet, right? Because many of these countries, these kids are only fed porridges, or they're only fed grains. And so they develop the severity of kwashiorkor. It occurs in children weaned from breastfeeding because of the mother's new pregnancy and fed instead sugar drinks or starch diets with minimal intakes of proteins, minimal intakes of vitamins and micronutrients such as folate, vitamin C, iron, iodine, and selenium. So the hair becomes thin and fragile with bands of loss of pigmentation. It's very, very important that you understand that protein is super important for hair pigmentation. You can also see children with kwashiorkor have low levels of albumin, which is protein, but also have low levels of PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids. The key ones here are the omega-3 fatty acids. And they have low antioxidants such as glutathione and vitamin E. Now, going back to this diagram where we have all these nutrients playing a role in the production of DOPA, right? So look here, omega-3. So we see under poor protein diets are low in omega-3 typically. They're also typically low in vitamin D. They're also low in iron. They're low in vitamin B3. They're low in vitamin B6. PLP, that's vitamin B6. So check your diet. Check your diet. If you haven't, your hair is going to turn gray. And that's the least of your worries, by the way. Hair turning gray in my opinion, is a vanity issue for a lot of you, for all of us really. But it's a marker, it's a sign of bigger problems, especially when it's turning gray too soon, when it's turning gray really young. Now I'm going to show you this study here. This one's from 1946. Thought it was important to pull. We have Roger Williams, a famous biochemist, won a Nobel Prize for the discovery of pantothenic acid or vitamin B5, which is what we're talking about here. He's the one who coined the term anti-graying factor and anti-stress factor for vitamin B5. You can see here the underlying causes of achromotrichia, which is another way to say loss of color of hair or graying of the hair, are not well understood. Both dietary deficiencies and hormonal disturbances have been implicated. A deficiency of pantothenic acid, which is vitamin B5, is known to result in graying of the hair in rats and other experimental animals. And as I just showed you in that study on 2 young adolescent girls, they had repigmentation of their hair with vitamin B5. So also in humans. There's evidence that additional factors, including PABA, para-aminobenzoic acid, may at times be involved. So this is one of the reasons why you see PABA. You've seen this. You may not know where, but you've seen this in shampoo. If you look at a lot of shampoos, they'll contain PABA. They contain B5 in the form of pantothenic acid or pantothenate. But that's one of the reasons why it's supposed to be there, because of the known, the known protective factors as it relates to hair. Okay. I want to bring up another topic or concept as well, and that's the topic of thyroid hormone. Because there's a lot of people, I think it goes back and forth, but I think it's every few years, thyroid hormone is in the top 5 of prescribed medications in the U.S. Many years it's number 1, but it kind of oscillates in that top 5. My point in saying that is it's a super common problem that many are diagnosed with, and it's a super common medication that gets prescribed. And one of the things that's important to understand is that thyroid hormone affects hair follicle function, especially the stimulation of the hair matrix keratinocyte and the proliferation of the hair and of hair pigmentation. And so in this study, we present the first evidence that humans' hair follicles are direct targets of thyroid hormones, and demonstrate that T3 and or T4 modulate multiple hair biology parameters ranging from hair cycling to hair pigmentation. So thyroid hormone is going to be an important part of this. And again, a lot of you are taking thyroid hormone, but what I'd like to show you, based on everything we just talked about, I want to just draw some correlations and connections for you. Because nobody's doing this. Nobody's making these connections. I keep showing you this diagram for a reason. Okay, I said before, protein is important, and I just showed you research, extensive research, that protein malnourishment can cause premature graying, among other disease. But we know that protein is the backbone of phenylalanine and tyrosine. And in order to make, let's just draw us another line. In order to make hair pigment, you need dopa. But you can't get it without protein. So protein deficiencies, this is one of the reasons why this happens. Okay? But we also said that stress, increases of stress, right, will steal or shunt dopa in this direction toward the production of stress hormones so that your body can cope and adapt to the stress. And this is one of the reasons why stress plays a major role, because stress steals the resources to deal with the stress, and in doing so robs the nutrients. Stress just burns through your vitamin and mineral status. But something else I want to show you based on what we're talking about here, which is, I just showed you that low thyroid can also lead to reduced pigment of hair. How come? What's the reason? Well, what is thyroid? T4 or T3. What is the T? What is the T? The T is tyrosine. For those of you that may not know, you can't make thyroid hormone without tyrosine. And so if you're under eating protein, you don't have enough raw ingredients to produce the hair pigment, you don't have enough raw ingredients to make adequate thyroid hormone, and then now add stress to the system, right? You're undernourished, and now you're going to add stress to the system, and then, many of you, your bodies can't handle or cope or adapt to stress, and you become chronically inflamed and chronically ill. And a lot of it stems from this right here, this lack of protein. I can't emphasize protein enough for hair pigmentation and hair growth, but also for thyroid. And there's studies now, I showed you this one study on, we now know that thyroid hormone is responsible for parts of hair pigmentation and hair growth, but we also know there are research studies in humans where topical application of thyroid hormone, so I haven't seen this on oral application of the medicine, but topical application of T3, T4 increases pigment. So how do we get T4 and T3? Well, we need tyrosine. Tyrosine plus iodine. So the 4 and the 3, that's iodine. Thyroid hormone, T4, you have a backbone made out of tyrosine, and you have 4 molecules of iodine. And with T3, it's same thing. Backbone of tyrosine, 3 molecules of iodine. But T3 is what we call active thyroid hormone. So it's the one that in order for your thyroid to properly work, you've got to convert T4 into T3. That requires a nutrient. That requires selenium. And I showed you earlier that low selenium is linked to, in some cases, to poor hair pigmentation. But we also, in order to make thyroid hormone, it's not just tyrosine and iodine. We also have several other enzymes and chemical pathways that happen here. And what do you need for that? You need vitamin B2, you need vitamin C for those pathways, you need magnesium, you need B12, you need zinc. All right, a lot of the same nutrients that are responsible for this pathway here, are responsible for the pathway of helping you also convert tyrosine into thyroid hormone. So how many of you out there, let's just do a quick survey, how many of you are on thyroid hormone medication? And how many of you on that thyroid medication are losing your hair or have premature graying of your hair and never knew this? It's all about nutrition. And if your doctor tells you anything other than, it's because he either doesn't know or she doesn't know, or they don't want you to know, one or the other. But nutrition's where it's at. If you're trying to pigment your hair and you don't have enough protein, you don't have enough phenylalanine or tyrosine, you don't have these nutrients up here, you're going to be in trouble. Your hair's going to turn gray. And if you have bad choices, bad habits, if you eat poor food, if you eat chemicals, if you eat a lot of seed oils, if you eat a lot of pesticides in the food and your food choices, if you're not eating organically, what do these things all have in common? When we eat poorly, just right here, if you eat poorly, then you increase oxidation. Why did I spend that first 20 minutes talking about oxidation? Because oxidation reduces pigment, turns you gray faster. So you got to eat well, but you also have to behave well, because your behavior, as I mentioned, exercise. But what else? Obviously, smoking. But many of you expose yourself to poor air. So your air quality is awful, not because of the cars outside driving and spitting out pollution. Car pollution today is vastly less than it was 30 years ago because of catalytic converters and other technology. Your air quality, a lot of your air quality is poor because you use all of these chemicals to clean your floors, to clean your clothes, your dishes. All these chemicals produce or generate free radical in your body. You breathe that stuff in, and it taxes your antioxidant system. It's increasing oxidation in your body. Now, those of you that use those plug-ins and those scent and those air fresheners and all that stuff, this stuff's awful for you. And it ages you faster. And that's what all this is about. When we say free radicals and oxidation, what we're really talking about is we're talking about aging. And you can gracefully age, right? I like to say gracefully. Or you can accelerate the process. And when you eat bad and you expose yourself to bad things, you accelerate the process. Alcohol, smoking, chemicals. But when you can control these things that are in your control, okay, you're going to increase your risk of graceful aging or of aging gracefully. There's no such thing as anti-aging. It's all coming for us. Aging is coming for us all, but we can do it better. And this is why when you see cigarette smokers in their skin and their face looks 20 years older than their counterpart, it's because they're causing free radical damage in their body at an accelerated pace over time, and they're aging faster. So if you want your hair color to maintain its color longer, you take good care of yourself. And so that comes with behaviors, eating behaviors and activity behaviors. Now, there's some other nutrients here. We've talked about a lot of nutrients, the B vitamins, particularly B5 and B12, and folate as being critically important for hair pigmentation. But we've also talked about minerals like zinc and copper and manganese because of their positioning and the way they help the antioxidant status with SOD and superoxide dismutase. But I want to leave you too with a couple of other things, some other things that we're seeing, right? And so L-tyrosine supplementation, L-phenylalanine supplementation. Now, I'm going to be clear, there's no great research that exists to support reducing gray hair with these things in humans. But there's all the acceptable theories on why we get gray hair faster point to these things being very, very important. So tyrosine, phenylalanine, vitamin C. Why? Because vitamin C is a very, very potent antioxidant. One of the most powerful antioxidants known to man. And then I say high-fat diet, but it's less of a high-fat diet, and it's more of a low-carb diet. There are now many case reports on people on keto, people on grain-free, people on carnivore diets, seeing their hair color return. And I know we can't base all of our decisions on anecdote of what's happening for other people, but it starts. The scientific observation process starts with seeing what other people are doing and how it's affecting or impacting their health. And we'd be fools to ignore those anecdotal reports. And I see this all the time in my practice when people change their diet, how much their hair improves. Not just the coloration of their hair, but also the integrity of their hair. I do want to show you this on tyrosine. This is a dog study. And it's not a human study, it's a dog study, but I thought I would throw it in. Increased dietary intake of tyrosine upregulates melanin deposition in the hair of adult black-coated dogs. So it's been previously shown in growing animals that there appears to be a distinction between the concentration of tyrosine required for healthy growth and development and that required to maintain full hair pigmentation. Evidence is provided here that a similar phenomenon exists in adult dogs whereby a tyrosine intake 2.5 times the recommended minimum was able to significantly reduce off-black coloration in healthy Labrador retrievers. So I know we're not dogs. Those of you listening, well, maybe some of you have your labs with you, but those of you listening and paying attention to this aren't laboratory retrievers. But, everything I've shown you today, I hope you get it. I hope you're picking up on it. Tyrosine, okay, tyrosine to dopa. We go back to the beginning. Let's reiterate that from the very beginning. What have we been saying this whole time? Is that you cannot make hair pigmentation without those base ingredients. But again, tyrosine is the responsible base ingredient for eumelanin and for pheomelanin. Those are the two predominant types of hair pigments that help give your hair color. So there you have it. That's a crash course in premature graying of the hair, why it happens, and what you can do potentially to prevent it, but also potentially what you might be able to do even maybe to reverse some of it. I hope this has been a helpful show for you. If you're trying to recapture some of your hair, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button down below and subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you on Thursday for a live Q&A all about hair pigmentation. Thanks for tuning in to the Dr. Osborne Zone. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more content like this, and make sure you come back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and Thursday at noon 30 for more episodes.